sewing tutorial. Let's talk about edge stitching. Rarely do I make a bag that I do not use this stitch, and I think a lot of you are like, what is that? What's the difference between that and a top stitch or a regular stitch? Let's talk about it. Let me start by saying, hairs in my nose. This is my absolute all-time favorite sewing book. If you can find this at like a used bookstore, first of all, the illustrations are like so gorgeous. So it's just a fun book to have, but it's just really good, quick information that is sound. It's from the 60s. So of course it has to be right. Those people knew how to sew stuff. Look how cute she is. Anyway, edge stitching is stitching done close to an edge, finished or turned under, and maybe either on the inside of the garment or on the outside of the garment, in which case it becomes top stitching. Did you hear that? Edge stitching is done on the inside of your bag or your garment. Top stitching is done on the outside. To get an even edge stitch, you're going to want to find something to guide your eyes, okay? So whatever that looks like for you, I usually find a spot on my presser foot, like a line, this little notch in the middle maybe, usually about 1/8 of an inch away from my edge, if not a little bit less. It is a tight little stitch. I am making a bag. This is the lining of my bag, and I turned my bag out through the lining, which oftentimes in bag making you will do. So what I've got left here is my 3/8 inch seam, which is not sewn in this section. So what I am going to do is fold these pieces down along the edge so the two folded edges are lining up properly, and then either clip it or pin it in place so it doesn't shift during flight. I am going to sew right along this open area using an edge stitch, going as close to the edge as I feel comfortable. You want this on the interior of the bag to be as minimally visible as possible. So as you get more and more comfortable with your sewing machine, you'll be able to do this closer and closer to the edge. I would shoot for like 1/8 of an inch. Let me close up on this. That just didn't feel close enough. So let's get all up in my grill. Okay, I am 1/8. This little marker right here is 1/8 of an inch away from my needle. And I'm sewing it right there. To sum it up, an edge stitch is basically a top stitch. You're doing it on the top of the fabric, but you're doing it usually on the interior of something. You're trying to close up something. Whereas on a top stitch, sometimes it's just decorative, right? Like on a bag handle. For example, these are my handles, and that is a top stitch because I'm not closing anything up. It's already closed. I'm just trying to make it look prettier. The edge stitch actually has a purpose. You're closing up a hole, because we don't want to have a hole in the bottom of our bag, but you don't want to put this stitch like 1/4 of an inch in, because then your seam allowance might flip-flop out, and that would be terrible. I am not the best example of thread matching because I tend to just leave it with whatever thread I've been using for my project, which is usually similar. But if you want that edge stitch to really blend in, pick a color that is closer to your fabric. Like I could have used orange here and it would have been almost invisible. This is on my lining of my bag, and I don't really care that much. So there's an edge stitch. Isn't it cute? Now I'm ready to turn my bag right side out. I hope this was helpful. If you have more questions about like sewing, the hair today. If you have any other questions about like little sewing terminologies that you hear and you're not quite sure what it means, drop it in the comments. This was such a great question that someone asked, and I'm so glad I was able to put an answer out for you. And again, if you want to look for this book, it's called the Coates and Clark Sewing Book from 1967. It's my favorite sewing book. Like and follow for more.